A single dream changed the fate of an entire civilization. A decision by a young shepherd triggered history's most famous war. This is the incredible story of Paris of Troy, the man who destroyed everything he loved. It all began with a terrifying nightmare. Hecuba, queen of Troy, was pregnant with her son. But every night the same dream haunted her. She saw herself giving birth to a flaming torch. This torch set all of Troy on fire, until nothing remained but ashes. The priests interpreted the dream. Their message was clear and terrible. The baby to be born would be Troy's destruction. When Paris was finally born, he was a beautiful child, bright eyes, a perfect smile, but he carried a deadly curse. King Priam made the most difficult decision of his life. He ordered his servant Agelaus to take the baby to the mountains and abandon him to die. It was the only way to save Troy. Agelaus obeyed with a broken heart. He climbed Mount Ida and left the child under a lonely tree. But here comes the first incredible twist of this story. 5 days later, Agelaus returned to the spot. He expected to find a small, lifeless body. Instead, he found something that would change everything. The baby was alive, chubby and healthy. A giant bear was nursing him as if he were her own cub. Agelaus understood he was witnessing a miracle from the gods. He took the baby in his arms and brought him home. He gave him the name Paris. The boy grew up among shepherds. Not knowing he was a prince, he became the most handsome and just young man in the mountains. He was so wise that other shepherds called him Alexander, the protector of men. But fate had much greater plans for Paris, and it all began with the most important wedding on Olympus. The gods were celebrating the marriage of Peleus and Thetis. Everyone was invited, except one, Eris, the goddess of discord. Eris was furious at being excluded. She decided to take revenge in a way no one expected. In the middle of the party, Eris appeared and threw a golden apple on the main table. The apple had an inscription that made everyone fall silent. For the fairest. Immediately, 3 powerful goddesses claimed the apple: Hera, wife of Zeus; Athena, goddess of wisdom; and Aphrodite, goddess of love. Zeus perceived the danger. If he chose one, the other 2 would become his eternal enemies. So he had a clever idea. He declared that a mortal should make the choice, and that mortal would be Paris, the shepherd of Mount Ida, known for his justice. The 3 goddesses descended from heaven and appeared before Paris. Each was more beautiful than the last, but they didn't content themselves with just showing their beauty. Each offered the young shepherd an irresistible gift. Hera promised to make him king of all Asia and Europe. Athena offered infinite wisdom and victory in all battles. But it was Aphrodite who made the proposal that changed history. She promised to give Paris Helen of Sparta, the most beautiful woman in the world. Paris, young and passionate, gave the apple to Aphrodite. It was the decision that sealed Troy's fate. Hera and Athena left furious, swearing revenge against Paris and his entire city. Years passed in peace, but then something extraordinary happened. King Priam organized funeral games to honor a son he believed had died as a baby. Ironically, these games were for Paris himself. The shepherds came down to the city to sell cattle, and Paris went with them. When Paris saw the athletic competitions, something awakened in his royal blood. He decided to participate. And here comes another impressive twist. Paris won all the competitions: racing, wrestling, boxing. He defeated all the princes of Troy. They were furious to be beaten by a simple shepherd. Deiphobus, the king's son, got so angry he drew his sword to kill Paris. But the young man ran to Zeus's altar seeking protection. It was then that Cassandra, Priam's daughter with prophetic powers, recognized him. She screamed the shocking truth that shepherd was the lost brother, the one who would bring destruction. Agelaus confirmed everything by showing the royal clothes he had used to wrap the baby. Priam, seeing his son alive, completely forgot the prophecy. He embraced Paris with tears of joy. The lost prince had come home. But the adaptation wasn't easy. Paris had to learn to live like a prince. His brother Hector tried to teach him to fight with sword and spear. But Paris preferred his bow, the weapon he mastered perfectly. The nobles despised the bow, calling it a coward's weapon. Before becoming a prince, Paris already had a great love. Okinon, a nymph of Mount Ida, was his wife. She had prophetic powers and knew all medicinal plants. When Paris prepared to travel to Greece as an ambassador, Okinon begged him not to go. She foresaw tragedy. But Paris, blinded by Aphrodite's promise, ignored her warnings. Paris's mission was to recover Hesaruna, Priam's sister who had been taken by the Greeks. He first tried in Salamis, but failed. Then he sailed to Sparta, where Menelaus reigned with his wife Helen. The moment had come for Aphrodite to fulfill her promise. When Paris saw Helen for the first time, he understood why she was famous throughout the world. Daughter of Zeus, she had beauty that defied description, hair golden as liquid gold, eyes deep as the ocean. Aphrodite did her work. Helen fell madly in love with Paris. For days they kept up appearances in Menelaus's palace. But then came the perfect opportunity. Menelaus had to travel to Crete for a funeral. He left Helen taking care of the Trojan guests. It was exactly what Aphrodite had planned. As soon as Menelaus departed, Paris convinced Helen to flee with him. They also took immense treasures from the palace. The return journey was long and dangerous. They passed through Egypt, where King Proteus tried to stop them. They made a stop in Sidon, where Paris bought precious silks for Helen. The journey lasted months. When Helen arrived in Troy, she divided the city in half. Priam was dazzled by her beauty and received her as queen, but Hector and the wise counselors foresaw disaster. Antenor, the wisest, suggested returning Helen immediately, but Priam refused, remembering that the Greeks had never returned Hesaruna. The Greek response didn't take long. First came a diplomatic embassy. Odysseus and Menelaus himself demanded Helen back, along with the treasures. The assembly of Troy rejected all demands. War was declared. Then the horizon filled with sails. 1,000 Greek ships arrived at Troy's shores. Agamemnon commanded the forces. Achilles brought his feared Myrmidons. Aegeans came with 12 ships. Diomedes led the Argives. It was the largest military force ever assembled in Greek history. For 9 years the Greeks attacked Troy's allied cities. The main city resisted behind impenetrable walls. Paris fought mainly as an archer, shooting deadly arrows from the walls. This irritated Hector, who criticized him for not fighting face to face as a prince should. In the 10th year, everything changed quickly. Achilles withdrew from battle due to a quarrel with Agamemnon. The Trojans gained advantage. Hector almost burned the entire Greek fleet. Paris actively participated in these victorious attacks. Then came the duel everyone expected. Paris against Menelaus face to face. The winner would keep Helen and the war would end. Paris accepted, but when he saw Menelaus advance furiously, he hesitated. Hector had to shame him publicly to get him to fight again. The duel was quick but intense. Paris threw his spear first but didn't pierce Menelaus's shield. Menelaus's spear pierced Paris's shield, but didn't wound him gravely. When Menelaus attacked with his sword, it broke on Paris's helmet. Desperate, Menelaus grabbed Paris by the helmet and began dragging him. The strap was strangling the Trojan prince, but Aphrodite intervened, broke the strap and wrapped Paris in a magical cloud, transporting him to his room. Then she forced Helen to join him. Despite her fury, Paris continued fighting in subsequent battles, always with his deadly bow. He wounded Diomedes in the foot. He killed Machenion, the Greeks' chief physician. He wounded Dorypylus in the thigh. His arrows always found their target. But the most important moment came after Hector's death. Achilles killed his beloved brother and dragged the body through the walls. Paris swore sacred vengeance, and he knew Achilles' secret. Everyone knew Achilles was almost invulnerable. His mother Thetis had dipped him in the river Styx as a baby. But there was one weak spot, the heel where she held him. It was the only vulnerable part of his body. Days after Hector's funeral, Achilles was fighting near the gates. Paris positioned himself carefully on the wall. Apollo, who hated Achilles, guided his aim. The arrow flew straight to the heel. Achilles, the greatest Greek hero, fell. Paris continued shooting until he was sure he was dead. The Trojans celebrated Paris as a hero for avenging Hector. But the victory was short-lived. The Greeks, desperate, brought Philoctetes from Lemnos. He carried Heracles' legendary bow, with arrows poisoned in the Hydra's blood. The world's two best archers finally faced each other. Paris managed to wound Philoctetes first, but Philoctetes managed to hit Paris with a poisoned arrow. The Hydra's venom began burning Paris's veins like fire. The Trojan doctors tried everything, but the poison was incurable. Paris, agonizing, remembered Agamemnon and her knowledge of medicinal plants. He asked to be taken to Mount Ida. When they arrived where she lived, Paris begged her to heal him, but Agamemnon, still hurt from being abandoned for Helen, refused. Paris died on the journey back, his body consumed by divine poison. When Agamemnon learned of his death, she was overcome with remorse. She ran to Troy, and seeing the funeral pyre, threw herself into the flames. The Trojans buried their ashes together. After Paris's death, Helen married Deiphobus, another of Priam's sons. But when Troy fell through the wooden horse trick, Helen helped the Greeks find and kill Deiphobus. The prophecy was completely fulfilled. Paris really caused Troy's destruction. By kidnapping Helen and refusing to return her, he condemned his city to total ruin. The greatest civilization of its time fell in flames, exactly as his mother's dream had predicted. All the suffering, all the deaths, all the destruction began with the choice of a young man who preferred love to power, passion to wisdom. And so ends the story of Paris of Troy, the prince who was born cursed and died fulfilling his terrible destiny. A lesson about how our choices can change the course of history forever.